Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. First, before we get started, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button before you leave, that really helps out a great deal with my channel's promotion. Thank you in advance for that. Today, I'm going to make a link bracelet with some carnelians, and it's going to have kind of a wavy design in it, with a little twist, kind of. So I'm going to have to forge each part of each of the links, so it's kind of going to be a little forging project, which I kind of like. It's what's more therapeutic than pounding on stuff. So before we get started though, I wanted to thank my YouTube subscribers. We just passed 6,300. That's great. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for your support. I wanted to thank my Patreon members as well, who are paying for my premium content over on Patreon. We're getting close to 60 members over there, and I really am proud of some of the cool stuff they're making, and I really wanted to let them know that I appreciate them. Thank you for your support. So, all right, let's get started on this project. So I'll show you a little bit of the carnelian here. We got these little round carnelians. It looks like they're, where'd my little ruler go? I'm always losing my little ruler. Okay. So it's like about seven millimeters for these guys. And I tried to pick out some that matched pretty well. So, see how that goes. This is my design idea book, which you can get on the merch store. I find that when I draw things out, I get a better outcome. And these ones have little dot matrix things, which helps me to keep things proportionate. Because that's one of my problems. I draw things like, I'm drawing a horse head or something, I get the body way out of proportion with the head. So it helps me with having some dots to guide me. So, oops, I did this one upside down. Alright, today I drew up some little links. I'm going to have a bezel set carnelian for each of the links, and soldered to that bezel is going to be a piece of 12 gauge square wire that I have kind of forged into a different shape, drilled a hole through, and that's going to be our kind of swirliness to the thing. I'm also going to solder a piece of 18 gauge round wire in kind of a half circle shape in order to go through those little holes that I'm going to drill there. And then finally, I'm going to try and do kind of a hidden clasp on this one, so that one of the links actually is the clasp. And I think it's going to take 6 links. I'm going to make 7 just in case. And if you look over here, here's kind of what I was planning on doing with the clasp. So here's the regular link from the side with a hole drilled in it, and that wire sticking out to the side. Here's the hole, here's the wire. Same way on this one, except instead of a hole on this one, I'm going to put a slot from the bottom so that that can click over one of those wires, and then a little flippy thing that flips up and clasps around that from underneath. So I think that'll be kind of a nice way to hide it. It'll still be slightly visible, but pretty hidden. And it'll be, I think, at a casual glance, it'll be hard to find the clasp on it when you're just looking at it. So I measured the overall thing, should be probably somewhere in the 195 to 200 millimeter thing, and that's why I think it's going to take 6 or 7 links, because that depends on how close I got to the exact size of these. But that's pretty much all we got to do. So let's make a bezel and create one of these links. I'm not going to make you watch me make all 6 of them, but I'll probably make you watch me do one, and then we'll connect them all after I do the rest off camera. And then I'll polish it and set the stones. So let's make a link here. I am going to use 3/16 inch tall bezel, and it's 26 gauge, so it's a little thicker than what a lot of people use. I think this is a good size. If you've never seen my videos before, I use hard silver sheet solder, and I use a flux called My-T-Flux that I spray on with a spray bottle. Sometime I should make a video that includes the entire process without cutting anything out. Be like this 4 to 6 hour long video. Nobody would watch it. You could put it on a loop to keep your kids asleep. I didn't cut that very straight, did I? Alright, let's file the end. So with these carnelians, because they allow some light to pass through the stone, I'm going to set them with an open back. That way I think they'll look a little prettier. So in order to do that, I'm going to create just a little step for the stone to sit on at the bottom of the bezel after we get it all shaped and everything. So use a little piece of solder like that. One of the things beginners have problems with is soldering their bezels shut. I find that the biggest problem that happens is that they heat one side too much on either side of the crack here, so that that side reaches temperature before the other side does, and it just jumps to that side, so it doesn't really solder it shut. So if you heat it pretty quickly, so both sides are getting heated at the same time, they reach temperature at about the same time, and it has less of a tendency to do that. So sometimes I go have coffee in my little shed in the backyard, which we made a few years ago as kind of a little relaxation space. And boy, it was chilly out this morning. It really feels like fall. I've noticed as I get older, I get cold a little easier. I think I've heard that that's a common thing. I mean, I'm not that old, but I'm getting there. Alright, let's see how we're doing on size. I got pretty good on size on that one, I think. Now I'm going to make a little ring out of 18 gauge round wire that fits right inside of here. Like if you overlap them like that when you're doing one of these kind of step bezels, you can easily shrink it down or make it bigger if you're pretty close but not quite in the right size range. I always cut it a little bit big. That way I can snip out little tiny pieces until it fits perfectly in there. It should, when we're done, end up looking like a completely flat, just little rim on the inside, because I'm going to file it flat afterwards. There we go, nice and snug. Alright, I usually, before I solder this in there, I usually push it down, make sure it doesn't have any wobbles in it when you look at it from the side, because then it'll be not a very flat platform for your stone to sit on. I'm just going to put a few pieces of solder here, and I'm going to actually set after I flux it, I'm going to set the bezel on top of those pieces of solder. Just heat it till they flow up in it. They just kind of go. Just want to make sure it's touching the ring and the bottom of the bezel. Just heat it like you would any other bezel. Should just kind of suck it right up in there. So you got a nice flat bottom there. Okay. So I made a prototype in advance of one of the links here. That's what it's going to look like. I'll have a little hole drilled through it like that. The one I'm making, I think I'm going to make into a clasp because it's going to be exactly the same as this, except instead of a hole drilled, like I said, I'm going to cut a little notch here and probably solder a little ball on there. So, so let's go ahead. We're going to make this part next, and I'm going to use 12 gauge square wire, and I cut up a couple pieces of it earlier to use. This one ended up being a little bit long, so I'm going to cut it off just a skosh. and then you'll use that length in order to do all of your rings. So let's measure that to find out. That's about 20 millimeters, 21 millimeters. Okay, I'm going to file the ends flat, or at least pretty flat. Alright, you're going to use your little bench block or your anvil. Before I do this, I think I'm going to make sure it's got a little bit of a curve from the spool of wire that I cut it off of. So I'm going to straighten that back out just a little bit. I'm going to use my chasing hammer to forge this. So we'll try to do this without hitting my finger too many times. But I'm going to forge it flat, you know, thickest in the middle, gradually tapering down flatter on this side, and it'll also spread that wider going in that dimension. And then on the other side, I'm going to do it in the other dimension that way. So I'll show you in a sec, Carrie. You'll understand better. But this side I'm going to start with. That's not bad. Okay, now in this one, I'm not going to forge it this way. I'm going to turn it 90 degrees like that. And we'll forge it flat from this side. I'm trying to get it as, you know, pretty symmetrical in both dimensions. And then I'm going to round the corners just a little bit with the file. We'll first flatten the end. Going to taper them in just a little bit. Normally at this stage for the other links I'm going to drill a little tiny hole right in the center of that. And to do that, make sure it doesn't jump around on you. Do a little center punch, you know, right kind of far enough away from the edge, like about right there, so that you don't slip and drill a hole too close to the edge and make it fragile. So you want it to be, you know, relatively centered there away from the edge. I'm going to go ahead, I just work hardened it really badly by pounding on it. So I'm going to anneal this to soften it up. If you're new to this, annealing is where you heat the metal up to take out the hardness that you just put in by working it, either pounding it, twisting it, bending it back and forth. That causes the silver to get harder and harder. That's called work hardening. Annealing makes that go away for you. So, and what you do is you just heat it up to the point where it's kind of just barely a reddish color, and then let it cool off. You get just a little red hint to it. Let that cool off for a minute. So we need to make it kind of wavy, right? Like this one. So I think this is the wider side, so this is going to be the side over here. And this side I need to somehow get it to curve against the way that it wants to curve here. So this side won't be too bad because I just softened it. So you could even just use some ball making pliers or something and just kind of bend it that way. It doesn't take as much strength as you'd think for once you've softened the metal back up like that. So you know, we got to get that rounded like that. This may still be a little bit long. I may have to cut off a little bit of this. So what you can do is you can take like a dapping punch if you want to, and then hammer it around that. I'm going to use this little bench block that has this nice little curve thing on it. Let's see, it starts to give it a little curve. Solder it on like this. I want to make sure the angle is just right too. Hard silver solder melts at about 1450 degrees, if you didn't know. Sterling silver melts at about 1650. This is Fahrenheit, by the way. Fortunately, I don't know the conversion right off the top of my head for my non-US audience. I apologize for that. You'll notice I'm using pick soldering. That's one of those skills that took me from a beginner to someone who is no longer a beginner. So if you want to learn how to do that, I'll put a link up there to my video about that. It's worth checking into. It really helped me to improve my soldering skills. Make slight adjustments after it's attached, probably. Now I need to put this guy on here, and I want to solder him on so he's only got one side attached, and then we'll resolder the other side after we hook these all together. That's about how I'd like it. So like I said, I'm just going to solder this one side on here and then leave that one unsoldered. And I have a little bit of solder on the pad there. You wouldn't have to pick solder this. You could lean a little piece of solder in there. Or if you're a paste soldering person, you could do that, I suppose. There's not really any right or wrong way to do this. Pretty close. So, but like I said, this one I drilled a hole, and I'll drill a hole in all the rest of them. This one I'm going to cut a slot and then mount a little ball here. Put a piece of tubing here and run some wire through it, solder it closed, and then so it'll be able to flip over that little ball and hold tight. So we'll see. That's my thought process anyway. But let me work on these other ones off camera, and I'll come back and we'll do the next steps. Alright, so we just need to really start hooking them together, and I don't think this should be too challenging. I reamed those out a little bit with a diamond burr to make them move around a little nicer on there. But really, just going to make sure these are lined up and that the loop is pretty good. When I do solder this, I want to make sure that this isn't touching any areas where there's any solder, so that I don't accidentally solder that to the ring, because I just really want to solder this spot right here. So let me cut some more little dinky pieces of solder. One of the things to remember, whereas generally when you're doing a piece of silver you have to heat the entire piece to get it to flow right, these are two separate pieces, and I don't really want anything over here flowing. So I'm just going to heat this, and while that will bleed off a little heat, I can get this hot enough pretty quickly to solder that there. You know, and then we don't have to worry about anything, you know, moving around weird. Again, you could solder this without using pick soldering. I just find it convenient. It allows me to put solder pretty precisely where I want it to go. Okay, so now I need to decide whether I need 6 or 7 links. And I was kind of going by these bracelets I made a little while back. So that would put me within, you know, pretty close range. This one is 7 3/4 inches, or 193 millimeters ish. So I'm thinking that's close enough, probably. If I do one longer, it may end up being too long of a bracelet. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and make the clasp here, and then we'll add it on there, and then we'll pickle it. So in order to do that, I'm gonna have to saw a little notch in here. So welcome to my messy bench block area. Okay, so we need on the bottom, we want to go part of the way through here. And it needs to be wide enough for 18 gauge. So, okay. So this is my thought. I have a notch there now. I'll clean that up with the file. Cut this little tiny piece of tube. I'm going to mount this right there. And I'm going to mount a little ball right on the end of this. And then I'll run a little wire loop through here that can hinge on that little tube, and it should slip right over that ball and hold it pretty securely. So let's see if I can get that all to be accomplished. But in order to do that, I need to make a little silver ball first out of some scrap. So here's that piece of 18 I was cutting some stuff off of. And let's see if I can't get a decent... I'll cut a couple of different size lengths and see what size the ball comes out to be. That way we have some choice. This is the biggest one. I think that's the one I want. I think those other ones are too small. So I'm going to go with this bigger one here. Sometimes it's nice to have a soft soldering surface and push things into. If I want to solder something on the back of this without this loop falling off, I'm going to want to push this down so that that can't drop off. So it's laying flat like that. So. And also, just to be safe, let's pick a little bit on the bottom of this thing too. That way we got some solder already in place. Look right there. Okay, so let's take one of those little pieces of tubing. I have a backup in case I lose track of this one. I'm going to put a little tiny bit of solder on here, on this other side, a little bit back from this one, and then I'm going to solder that on there. So let's, these little tiny tubes, this tube is about the size that an 18 gauge wire will fit through, and it's small enough to where if you pick it up while it's hot, it'll crush sometimes under pressure and heat. So let's put a little solder back on here. No more. Hopefully the ball doesn't fall off. Ooh, it's wanting to. We can always push it back up there if we need to. So like I said, I don't use the tweezers very often with the tubing because I'll squish it. So let's see if I can get this to solder on here nicely. It keeps trying to twist on me. Stop it. There we go. That's kind of pointing in the same direction. That ball should be on there hopefully. Let's cool this off and see how it looks. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of smooth out the edge of that tube. So the idea here is we're going to have I'm doing this mostly to get a length of wire. I think I will use 18 gauge here, it's a little more durable. Okay. So the thing is, I want it pretty close to the tube and straight so it doesn't, have a lot of profile from above. And it needs to stick out a little bit because I'm going to pinch this in order to adjust how tight it is against there. So I think before we do this, though, I'm going to solder this to the rest of it. Oops, come back here. That's a little better. Except that's a problem. That pushes that off. So I need to file this end a little bit. Okay, well, I'm going to let it pickle, think about it some more, and then I'll set the stone to polish it, and I'll show you the result. So I've been setting stones and polishing and stuff. I did all of the stones except for this end one here. So I got it all filed down and everything to the right size, right height. I do this different than some people. I use the flat side of my needle nose pliers to push the bezel in. Seven links, 7 bezels, 7 stone settings. I think my hands are going to be sore tomorrow. So, like I said, on this clasp, I'm not thinking it's going to be a practical clasp. So I'll probably cut one of these links off and come up with a new clasp for it. But I'm not sure yet what it's going to be. But I wanted to have a complete bracelet to show you at least for this video. So. Last step is burnishing, and I use the rounded outer part of the needle nose here to just kind of push that top edge down, work my way around. Alright, so I will clean that up the rest of the way. Alright, so there we go. Alright, well, I'll take better pictures at the end, and we'll call it a day. Okay, well, that was a Carnelian link bracelet. I hope you enjoyed that one. If you did enjoy the content, make sure to hit the like button. I'd love it if you'd leave a comment or a suggestion. Those things are great too. Before you leave also, you might want to check out my channel page. I have I'm getting close to 230 videos, I think. I may have passed it, I don't remember. But there's a lot of content there, beginning, intermediate, advanced stuff. Something for almost everything. So check that out and consider subscribing to the channel. So also check out the video description down below. There's links to some other relevant sites like my Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee link, my website where you can see my jewelry, or my merch store. So check those out too. Thanks for watching. Take care. Happy silversmithing.